How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Tom. Today we're going to do something that's a little bit the same and maybe a little bit different. So you guys all know that, at least by now, most of you that have been watching the channel, you know that I make flags, lots of flags, and sell them. And I recently got it's been about a year, but I got a CNC, and I'm only just now kind of figuring out how it works. But anyway, I've never done any customized flags before, just regular American flags and thin line flags. But I have an old friend of mine from high school who contacted me recently, and she asked me if I could do a military tribute flag for her father, to which I said, of course, yes, absolutely. So I got to talking about it with her and to figure out kind of what she wanted. And she wanted something that was really extra special. She was in the military as well, and her father had recently passed away. And when that happened, she was given the flag at his funeral, the folded flag, and her brother, didn't get anything. And she wanted to make this flag for him for his birthday as a tribute to their father, so he could have something as well. And anyway, so I got to talking with her about it, and she wanted it to be really extra special. She wanted something different. She wanted something unique. She was looking at pictures. I sent her a bunch of pictures of mine and some other things that we can do, and some other people that I know, types of flags that they do. And I would never do one exactly like somebody else, but I can take certain elements of that and incorporate it into one of my flags, and that's kind of what we did, a lot of those. But anyway, she really liked the super extra rustic look where the flag is just tattered and torn up and really beat up looking, and I had never done one like that before. So I was like, yeah, sure, I can do that. It's something new. It's interesting for me to always do something new. I'm always looking to learn how to do new techniques and make new things. But anyway, she wanted that really rustic, tattered looking look. She also wanted a 3D effect. She wanted the flag, and then she also wanted the U.S. Army seal on it, and she wanted her dad's name and his dates of service and things like that on there. And it was really important to her that it be unique. So I drew up a picture, and if I have it somewhere, I'll put it on here so you can see it. Send it to her, and she liked it. Again, I'm not a fantastic artist, but anyway, and I got set to work on it. So that's what this video is about. It's a custom 3D military tribute flag for a friend of mine. And I learned a lot during this process. I made some mistakes. I had some problems, and you're about to see how I overcame those and how it came out. So stick around. That's what we're doing in this video today. I started by cutting my union from a solid 1x12 that I had bought for this purpose. I usually make the entire flag, including the union, from 13 individual pieces, but in this case the union would be personalized on the CNC, so I needed it to be a flat, solid piece. As you can see, the 1x12 cupped on me, which they are prone to do, so I decided not to waste any other time or resources trying to get a single solid piece to stay flat, and decided to just glue up 2 pieces of 1x6 select pine instead. In my experience, select pine is not only free of knots and more aesthetically pleasing, but generally drier and more stable than common boards, which is why I usually prefer to work with it, though it is more expensive. So I cut my 2 pieces from a 1x6 that I had on hand left over from another project and used my flag jig to glue them up. Once the glue dried, I pulled out the panel and gave it a quick once over with the sander. I'm using that new Pioneer Works sander that I did a review on a couple of months back, so if you haven't seen that and you're interested, I will leave a link for that video in the description below. Next, I prepped it and attached it to the CNC spoil board so that I could run a quick flattening pass over it. Now, this probably wasn't entirely necessary with the select pine, but I wanted to make sure that I wouldn't have any issues with the carve, especially considering that this would be my most complex carve on the CNC to date, and I just wanted to mitigate as many variables as possible to ensure everything went smoothly. Once that was done, I pulled it back out of the CNC to distress and stain it.
To do this, I used my angle grinder with this graph speed cutter disc that I bought off Amazon to cut, gouge, and otherwise distress all 4 edges of the union. I'll leave an Amazon affiliate link to this disc in the description below for you. Next, I burned the union, making the edges a little extra dark to go along with the heavily distressed theme that I was going for. As always, I knocked off the loose residue from the burn with a quick sanding and wiped down with a damp cloth. If you haven't already seen it, I have an entire video dedicated to my burning technique that I'll also link to below. After burning, I stained it with my go-to Minwax True Blue stain. Again, I have 2 videos on what colors I use on these American flag projects and how to get them, because there is a trick to it, and I'll link those for you below as well. The first one deals with how to get the colors, and the second one compares the different types of stains and shows you which works the best and is the easiest to apply. Once the stain was sufficiently dried, I put it back into the CNC and started the custom carve. Now, my CAD skills are nowhere near good enough to create this file myself at the moment. So I purchased it from a seller called That Wooden Flag on Etsy. The height of the union that this file makes is the same as my normal size, but the length for some reason is slightly shorter. I just adjusted for this by making the stripes, and therefore the whole flag, slightly shorter to accommodate for it. Something else I really liked about this seller is that he sells the actual G-code rather than the CAD file, which still has to be adjusted and converted to G-code in CAM before you can use it. Again, this was very convenient for someone like me, relatively new to CNC, or more particularly to CAD CAM software, who would have struggled to get that right for myself. I know some CNC users don't like that, as they feel they can't trust someone else's G-code, but it worked perfectly for me. I used a 60-degree V-bit as instructed by the seller and did a pre-cut on a piece of MDF. And it not only came out great, but it also saved me a lot of time and stress. So if you're okay with using someone else's G-code, I'm comfortable recommending this seller's files to you. Once I got the union cut, I moved on to making the stripes. I actually had about 2 full flags worth of stripes pre-cut, burned, and ready to go. So I don't have any video of me doing those things. But if you want to see that process in its entirety, check out my How to Make a Wooden American Flag video if you haven't already seen it. I'll link that also for you below. Since I already had those prepped, I went straight to shaping and distressing them. I didn't film it, but I laid the stripes out in the order that I would use them and then drew the tattered shapes of them freehand with a pencil. Once that was done, I used my jigsaw to cut the shapes for all the stripes and then distressed all of the edges the same way that I did the union. After that, I burned them and stained them, but I didn't film the staining because I have about 10 videos on me staining flag stripes at this point, and all you have to do is watch any of those other flag project videos if you want to see me painting stain on the stripes. As it turned out, that extra dark burn around the edges wasn't actually dark enough for me after staining, so I decided to hit them with the torch again after they were stained until I got the look I was going for. I also ended up cutting the lettering on the 2 stripes that have the person's name and dates on there off screen, mostly because I think I forgot to film it or I lost the footage, I'm not sure, but in either case, I mean, it would have just been more footage of you watching the CNC cut that stuff into the stripe. The important thing to take note of here is that I did, when I was distressing the edges of these particular 2 stripes, make sure that I didn't go too far inside, that I stayed close to the edge on these 2. That way it wouldn't affect where the lettering was going to be when I cut it in there with the CNC. But I laid it all out after I got the stripes the way that I wanted it, and wow, man, I was really impressed with the way this thing looked. I was really happy with it, and I couldn't wait to keep going. So originally the plan was to use 1/2-inch plywood as the base layer for this flag. The idea was that the flag itself would sit on top of this base layer, and the exposed portion of the plywood that was visible where the flag was tattered and worn away would be stained green, and this is where the army seal would go. So I cut the plywood to size, stained it green where it would be exposed, burned it, and then started gluing the stripes down to it. And that is when disaster struck.
All right, so I ran into a pretty significant problem here. I've never made a multi-layered flag like this before. So I was taking some advice from some of the people in some of my flag making and other groups on Facebook, and a lot of them do it this way. However, and when I say this way, I mean with your top layer as 1x material, 3/4 inch thick material, and then the bottom layer as 1/2 inch plywood. The problem that I ran, and everything was going great actually, until we got to this point. So I got all of the green done. It looked really good. I put an initial burn on there, and that ended up okay, just to add some the burning effect to it so that it looks like the rest of the flag. But what happened was when I started gluing the flag down, I realized that I would like to have a deeper burn at the transition, so it's kind of black right there between the green and the ends of the flag. And I did that, and that's where it went. That's where it went south. So as I put that burn on it, most of it came out okay, but parts of it started bubbling up, and the top layer of the plywood started peeling away. And I mean, it's not really, really bad. And at first I was thinking I could get away with it by just calling it, this thing is extra rustic. I've never made a flag this distressed before. So as part of the, look of it, that it would be okay. And that hopefully the lacquer, a heavy coat of lacquer would hold it down and, going forward, and then it would still look fine. But I really started thinking about it, and again, I have OCD, so like it bothered me. It literally kept me up all night last night. I was out early this morning. We went out to eat and stuff, and man, it was bugging me and bugging me and bugging me. And I came home and looked at it, and I was like, so I don't think I can leave it like this. My biggest concern is that it will, once I get it done and finished and lacquered, and even if it looks fine, that it will continue to separate over time underneath that first layer of plywood, and then eventually it'll start peeling up in that area of the flag, and a lot of that area is exposed. And quality is, well, it's paramount. It's the most important thing to me. In my real life job, I am actually a quality manager, so this kind of thing that I'm not going to be able to live with, that I'll always be worried about. Originally I wanted to do it 2 layers of 1x material, but I opted to go with this because I saw other people doing it this way, and because it would save on costs and on weight, because this is actually also the first project that I am shipping to somebody. But at the end of the day, my gut was always telling me that I should just do it with 2 layers of 1x material, 3/4 inch thick material. And I probably should have listened to my gut, because that's what I'm going to do now. I think what I have to do at this point is I'm going to need to, well, I have 3, here's the thing. I have 3 stripes that are glued down to it right now, and they're glued down good, as you saw. The rest of them are not. So I think at this point, my only option is I'm going to cut the plywood, cut those out on the plywood, flip them over and run them through the planer to remove the plywood and get it back down to just the 3x material. And then put it, then I'm probably going to laminate up some 1x6s or something into a big enough piece that I can use that as the base rather than this 1/2 inch ply, because that's solid wood and I can burn it as much as I want, and I won't have this issue, and I won't even have to worry about this issue of things peeling up. I mean, obviously it's going to cost more, about $40-50 more than I had anticipated in paying. So, the profit margin won't be there for this project. But again, this is the first time I'm ever making one of these, and this is what happens. You make mistakes, you run into problems, you live and you learn. So next time I'll know what to do, and I won't have to run into this again, and I will price accordingly and all of that, and it'll be fine. But for this one, I'm going to have to take a little bit of a hit on it and do it the right way, because I can't live with it like this. So that's what we're going to do now. All right. So that actually worked, honestly, a little bit better than I even thought it would. There's a little bit of extra stuff on here, but I mean, it's coming up very, very easily. So between a chisel and sander, I'll hit it with the sander real quick. We'll clean up the rest of that. The only problem is, so it didn't work perfectly. The only problem is that as it went through the other side, as this was down, it did some damage as it was going over. So I'm going to have to clean this up and sand it just a little bit to get the scratches evened out, and then fix it with some more stain, but it should be fine. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do it off camera real quick. I'm just going to very, very lightly sand it with some like 400 grit just to get this stuff off, because some of this stuff is actually not scratched in the stain. It's just sitting on top. So I'm going to clean it up the best I can, and we'll come back and see what's up with it. All right, so I actually hit a little bit of luck here. I just took a damp rag and had to press a little bit in some of those spots, but none of that was actual damage. It was just like sawdust that was kind of, smashed onto it, and it all came out, and it looks great. I don't have to do any kind of repair work or anything on it. I'm going to be able to use it just the way it is. I'm so happy with that because, I just, nobody likes having things go wrong, but it's nice when things go right for once. So I will take it as a win and be happy with it. And I guess I should be very thankful that I was thoughtful enough to put some paste wax on my on the bed of my planer before I used it, and that probably helped me out a lot here. So if this ever happens to you, you might want to throw a little bit of extra wax on your planer. Especially do it if you've never done it before, because it just makes everything slide through there smoother and protects the bed a little bit. So anyway, next step is to make a new base for this. I'm going to use 1x6s, and I'll just laminate them together into a panel, and I need to go get some of them because I don't have any. So I will be back, and we will move on to that. So I made a quick trip to the Big Orange store and ended up getting a poplar 1x12 because it was just so nice and flat. It only costed a little bit more than the pine, and the pine that I looked at was all kind of warped and crazy looking, and it would only require a single glue seam between the two pieces as opposed to 3 seams between 4 pieces had I gone with 1x6s. So I brought it back and I cut the 2 pieces to length on the miter saw, ripped them to width on the table saw, and then added some pocket holes along the seam for reinforcement, and then glued it up in my flag jig. I've found that this jig comes in really handy for gluing just about anything up, which is why I plan to build another one, a larger one, and soon, which I will of course film for you guys, so keep an eye out for that. Once it dried up for a little while, I pulled it out, sanded it down nice and smooth with my new sander, and then laid the flag out on top of it and marked the area to be burned and stained. Then I burned it, making sure to give it a nice dark burn around the edge and transition area the way that I wanted, stained it green, and man, I was really happy with the way this turned out. I mean, really happy. Sometimes those mistakes are really blessings in disguise, and this was one of those times. Once that was all done, I was ready to start assembling the flag. Again, those first 3 stripes were still glued together to each other, so I started with them, got them glued down, and then flipped the board over and screwed them to the poplar base from the back for added security. This thing is going to last forever. I just continued doing the same thing, working my way up, going through the first 6 bottom stripes, and then I added the union, followed by the last 7 stripes, until everything was eventually glued and screwed together. The most important thing that I would tell you about this part has to do with putting the screws in, and the most important part of that is the measurement. I would tell you to measure twice, 3, 4, 5 times, however many times it takes, until you are absolutely sure that your measurements are correct
because the one thing that you do not want is one of those screws popping out somewhere that you don't want it to come out at. And then finally, once you've got the entire thing assembled, the next step is to attach the Army seal. Now, originally I was going to glue this, but I came up with an even better idea.
All right, so my original plan was I was just going to glue this down directly on here. But since I'm doing this whole 3D thing, I got this idea in my head because I have a sign that I installed in my kitchen in a similar way. And that was that to try to raise it up off of here a little bit. And I went to look for some spacers, and the only spacers, the nylon spacers that they have, are white. They had some metal ones, but I didn't want to deal with painting them and then, maybe the paint flaking off later. So instead they had these black screw covers, and basically you put a screw down in here and then you fold this thing over and it snaps into place on there to cover the screws, and it just leaves this like little black nub. But what I plan to do is just cut that cap part of it off like this, where it just leaves the bottom part. Use that as a spacer underneath, and it'll lift it up about like an 1/8 or 3/16 of an inch, something like that, up off of there, and give it that 3D effect. And I think it'll look pretty cool, and it's just another little thing that I can do for the customer to make it extra special. So that's how I'm going to do it. So I cut those caps off of my makeshift spacers, worked out where and how many I wanted to use. I ended up going with 5, and drilled the holes in the seal for the screws to pass through. I got this laser cut seal from Etsy from a seller called Church House Woodworks, and I'll leave the link to it below for you with everything else. Next, I oriented the seal where I wanted it to be mounted, marked out where the screws would go, and then pre-drilled holes for the screws into the flag base. Then I prepped the screws for install by painting them black to match the seal. I had intentionally made the base slightly bigger than the flag just to be on the safe side, and also to make sure that I got everything all squared up once it was assembled. So the next thing I needed to do was to take it over to the table saw and trim and square it up. The next step was to seal it, but before I did that, I needed to tape the edges. Since I had multiple layers, I decided that this flag would need a border to cover up those transitions, and since I would be gluing that border to the edges of the flag, I needed to tape them first so that they wouldn't get lacquer on them. Once that was ready, I sealed up the flag with my finish of choice for things like this, which of course is lacquer. And once I got it all sealed up, I needed to make the border. Like I already mentioned, I already had a couple of flags worth of stripes pre-cut and burned, so I just used some of those for the border. I cut them to size, distressed them the same way that I had the rest of the flag, and then burned them to a crisp because I wanted a nice dark burn on them. Then it was on to the finishing table to apply lacquer to those. After that, I finally installed the border using some simple butt joints and 18 gauge brad nails. Once that was done and the lacquer was cured, I installed the seal on my makeshift standoffs. All right, so the last thing that I need to do for this flag is to put some way to hang it on there. There's lots of different ways that you can do that. I like to put keyholes on the back of things that I can because it's just super convenient for the person, and then also with the flags, and this flag in particular, because it doesn't have supports on the back like a regular flag. It's completely flat. So I don't want it to be sticking out from the wall too far. I thought about putting some of those D-rings on there, and that can still be done. But I have some other paintings hanging up in my own house that are on D-rings. They came like that. And they tend to hang a little bit away from the wall. And I'm trying to avoid that. So if you install your anchors or your screws correctly into the wall with the keyholes the way that I normally do them, it should be perfectly flat against the wall. So I try to think about these little things like this for all of my customers, not just the special ones like this. That's why I take the time to set everything up and put keyholes on the back of my flags and the back of my crosses and things like that, because I feel like it's just more convenient for the customer that way. just my little touch to do it. It doesn't take very long. In this case, it's kind of a hassle. I'll show you in a second because I have the little Cobalt router table, and it's not set up to go any farther than like 2 inches away from the router bit. So I need these to be about 4 inches inside the flag is what I came up with. So I had to kind of jerry rig a way to do it, and I'll show you that right now. So basically I set this up pretty much the same way I would my flags or my crosses. In those cases, I'm just using the supports when I do this, but I'm going to have to do this with the entire flag. So in this case, I will set the flag up against this stop and against this makeshift fence that I've put on here. Press it down on the keyhole, and then I have set this block on the other side that's it should be exactly a half an inch away from the end of the flag. So once I set it down on the keyhole and slide it over, it'll make a 1/2 inch keyhole slot on the back of the flag. So now I have to move my stops around so that I can do it on the other side for this side. So I'll do that real quick. So here we go again, just the opposite direction. All right, so there are our keyholes at the top of the flag. They're in that solid poplar that makes up the backing piece. So, they're pretty strong and stable, and that's what they can use to hold it. If they decide they would prefer to have like a wire or D-rings or something, you can get that stuff from Home Depot. They can put that on themselves if they prefer, but this is the way I'm going to provide for them to hang the flag like I do the rest of the flags. Again, it's just really convenient. All you got to do is throw your anchors and screws in the wall in the right place and slap it up there, and it comes on and off really easily. So that's it. This thing is done. I got to get it packaged so that I can get it in the mail and send it out. Okay, so after a little more thought, I decided that because this thing is so heavy, I think it would probably be just fine with those keyholes the way they are. But it would be better if I put one of these metal supports on there, and it, because it would just make it stronger, and I would just have better peace of mind about it, sending it out, and it'll just take me a few minutes. Now, I am kind of playing with fire here a little bit because there is some possibility for error here that could result in me screwing something up. But I think I've taken the precautions, and I think it'll be okay. So I will cross my fingers, give a little prayer, and hope for the best here. But again, it's just one of those things, I have a little OCD that I deal with, and this is one of those things that'll keep me up wondering that, oh man, are those keyholes going to hold? Again, I'm sure they will, but I'm 100% sure they will if I put these supports on there. So that's what we're going to do real quick. My plan here is to put them in place, and then I'll mark around there. And then I have already, off camera, taken this piece and drilled a hole through it so that I can use it as a guide, because this is not going to fit on my little drill press. And even if it did, that would be really difficult to hold it up level. But anyway, I'm just going to clamp this to it and use it as a guide to make my hole. And again, I don't even need to really make a hole. I just need to make an indentation that's about 1 millimeter down so that will sit in there. And then I'll screw it on, and then I'll be done. So this actually turned out to be more problem than it was probably worth. But yeah, my guide boards did not hold when I started to drill with the Forstner bit. They moved on both sides, which caused some tear out and some uneven drilling, and it's just kind of messed things up overall. The right way to do this would have been to pre-drill the indentions first and then cut the keyholes, but I didn't do it that way, so this is the way I had to do it this time. So I had to bust out the chisels, which mine are not good. They are moderately sharp, but not very, and my skills with them are not great. And some sandpaper, and I flattened them out, and I made them look as good as I could. And
you know, it was good. It was good enough for government work, as they say. But you know, I probably should have just left them alone. But at the end of the day, I ended up getting them okay and got them recessed in there the way they were supposed to be, and they looked fine. I mean, they're in the back. There was some little spots that weren't perfect, but you know how that is. Nothing's perfect, right? But anyway, I reinforced it with a little black CA glue, medium CA glue, just to make sure that they stuck in there extra good, and screwed them on, and then we were good.
So, hey, look, at the end of the day, we're woodworkers. We do everything by hand. We're not perfect. And it bugs me that I'm not perfect, but the truth of the matter is that I'm not perfect, and neither are you, and nor is anybody else. Um, this flag was perfect until that, so now it's gonna eat at me. But it's okay. It's gonna be all right.
But at the end of the day, this thing came out awesome. I was happy with it. The customer was happy with it. The person she gave it to, her brother, was happy with it. They loved it. They had nothing but good things to say about it. It was the nicest flag that I have ever made by far, and I will be making more of them. Probably with, you know, maybe the 4 different branches or something when I have time. But man, I really couldn't have been happier with this. Again, nobody's perfect. Nothing's perfect. I always wish that I could be, but this thing came out as perfect as it could, and I really couldn't have asked for it to come out any better.
So that's it. That's how it came out. I was personally very happy with it. I'm kind of a perfectionist. I have some OCD, so it bothered me that there were some problems with it. Not problems, but things that I knew that I had to overcome, and whatever. I just prefer things to be perfect, but it is what it is. And as woodworkers, we all know that we can never make anything perfect, and it's just one of those things that I have to get over. But anyway. Yeah, I sent it out. That's going to be the subject of another video, probably after this one. It's the first time I'd ever shipped anything anywhere, and I wanted to share with you guys how that came out, what I did, how I packed it, who I used to ship it, how much it costed, all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that, watch out for that one because it's coming up soon. But anyway, I had a really good time. I learned a lot doing this. I hope you guys liked the video. That's going to do it for this one. Do all those things that the algorithm likes, like, subscribe, leave a comment. I will get back to you. I am still at the point where I'm getting back to everybody on comments, so I do that. But anyway, thanks for watching. Stay safe and happy woodworking. I'll see you next time.